Okay, here's a translation aiming for a natural and engaging English style, suitable for a narrative context, while also respecting the nuances of the original Russian. When unpredictable events took a sinister turn, the palace's cat found herself utterly helpless. She lacked the strength to protect her small kitten from the looming threat. And yet, just when all seemed irrevocably lost, something unexpected happened. Just look who decided to come to the rescue. The events that followed are unlikely to leave anyone indifferent. The silence that had gently enveloped the forest was suddenly shattered by a mysterious, barely audible sound. It resembled a desperate cry, seemingly coming from the depths of the woods. Gleb had never encountered anything like it, because this chilling howl was strangely intertwined with both panic and despair. Interrupting his usual patrol, Gleb tilted his head, trying to pinpoint the source of this disturbing call. The sound, it seemed, was coming from the direction of an ancient, gnarled tree growing at the edge of a boggy area. With each passing second, the cry grew more desperate, as if someone were begging for help. Seized by a mixture of curiosity and concern, Gleb didn't waste a moment. He hurried towards the sound, leaving his gear behind. His heart beat faster, filled with both fear and determination. The closer he got to that tree, the clearer the heart-rending sounds became, tearing through the night's quiet. The undergrowth began to thin, and then, suddenly, the man was faced with an astonishing scene. In a tiny clearing completely flooded with water, a young kitten was desperately clinging to the surface, struggling against the waves with all its might. Its eyes, full of terror, gazed at the world with a plea for salvation. Every movement was becoming more difficult, and Gleb literally froze in place, realizing that he was looking at a palace's cat kitten. These animals are known for their cautiousness and even aggression, especially when threatened. Moreover, palace's cats are excellent swimmers, so why wasn't the mother cat rescuing her offspring? Turning his head in search of answers, Gleb noticed the glint of metal through the shadows of the forest. Looking closer, he realized it was the mother cat. Her paw was firmly clamped in a poacher's snare, securely fastened to a tree trunk. Her eyes, full of pain and terror, pleaded for help. All efforts to free herself were in vain. The trap held her too tightly. Gleb's heart ached. He understood that the little palace's cat had no chance but to rely on human intervention. Without hesitation, he approached the edge of the water. Taking off his boots and carefully rolling up his sleeves, the man stepped into the cold, murky sludge. The icy water chilled him to the bone, but his gaze showed unwavering resolve. He slowly reached out his hand towards the kitten, quietly reassuring it. "Don't be afraid, little one, I'm here." Gleb's voice seemed to calm the frightened little creature. Trembling, the kitten froze, and its frantic movements noticeably lessened. When the man got close enough, he very carefully scooped up the shivering, wet body. Once on dry land, Gleb held the kitten tightly against his chest, trying to warm it with his body heat. However, he couldn't leave the mother cat in such a state. Approaching the suffering animal, Gleb carefully examined the chain, trying to determine how to release her paw without causing further injury. But then, the silence was suddenly broken by the sounds of voices and the crunch of snow coming from deep in the woods. Gleb felt a knot of dread tighten inside. Poachers were probably returning. The situation was becoming extremely dangerous and required immediate action. He hid the little palace's cat in the dense undergrowth to keep it safe, and then settled nearby, concealed in the shadows, to assess the situation. From his hiding place, Gleb saw two men in tattered clothing, carelessly dragging guns, traps, and snares over their shoulders. Their rough voices were interspersed with coarse laughter, as if they were sure that no one ever came this way and certainly could not interfere with them. As the poachers approached the tree where the trapped cat was languishing, Gleb could make out fragments of their conversation. "Check on that palace's first," one ordered, pointing at the unfortunate animal. "The pelt of that creature is worth a good amount." Anger flared in Gleb's chest, his fists involuntarily clenching. But he knew perfectly well. A direct confrontation at this point would have fatal consequences for him and for the palace's cat. All that was left was to act as calmly as possible, waiting for the right moment and keeping his eyes on the unfriendly visitors. Upon seeing the men return, the trapped cat hissed and snarled, straining against the chain. One of the poachers took out keys to make sure the trap was still secure. Seeing this, Gleb realized that he had a tiny opportunity to use the enemy's tools against the owners themselves. He picked up a small stone and threw it towards some dense bushes nearby. The rustling was not long in coming. The poachers immediately turned around. "Did you hear that?" one whispered, looking in that direction with obvious suspicion. "Let's go check," the other replied, pointing his gun at the noise. While they were away, Gleb stealthily crept over to where the men had left their gear. Among the carelessly scattered items, he found a heavy wrench. Realizing that time was running out, he rushed to the tree to free the cat. However, hearing approaching footsteps, he had to freeze for a moment. Without losing his composure, Gleb resolutely stepped out of his hiding place, clutching the wrench, and shouted loudly, "Get out of here, you have no business here." The poacher's ringleader grinned, answering in a mocking tone. "You seriously think you can scare us? This is our territory, and the palace's is ours too." Gleb stepped between the men and the trapped animal, and his eyes showed unwavering resolve. "I won't let you take her," he said so confidently that the poachers were momentarily taken aback. Sensing a hidden strength on his side, Gleb coldly added, "You're not alone here. Ranger patrols regularly pass through this area. Do you think you can avoid meeting them?" The mention of rangers visibly alarmed the criminals. They briefly exchanged glances, and one muttered discontentedly, "It's not worth the risk." After that, the men, casting a hateful look at Gleb, disappeared into the depths of the forest. Only when they had completely vanished did Gleb allow himself to exhale. He approached the exhausted cat, who was still snarling, but not as aggressively, and carefully removed the chain tightly gripping her paw. Sensing freedom, the palace's cat warily looked around, and then, hearing the mother's call, the kitten darted out of the undergrowth and rushed to her. Their touching reunion was expressed in quiet purrs and nose-to-nose contact. Gleb watched this moment of happiness with relief and wondered if he would ever see this pair again. As it turned out, the long-awaited meeting took place much sooner than he could have imagined. Several months had passed since then, and Gleb had managed to walk through those same places many times, carrying out his usual patrols in the forest. One foggy morning, he noticed a thin strip of smoke slowly rising into the sky, like a mysterious signal of the presence of strangers. Carefully crouching and using the thick vegetation as cover, the man approached the source of the smoke. At first, there was only the rustling of the forest leaves, but gradually, muffled male voices were added to it. Hiding in the bushes, Gleb saw 3 rough-looking men settled around a campfire. A small pot hung over the flames, and nets and traps were scattered around. 2 rifles were carelessly leaned against a tree. Realizing that openly confronting armed poachers was dangerous, Gleb decided to retreat in order to return later with reinforcements. However, fate intervened. As the man cautiously moved back, a dry twig snapped under his foot, and this sound was enough to betray his presence. The poachers became alarmed and, grabbing their weapons, rushed towards the place where the crackling had come from. The fog that had concealed Gleb now helped him to escape deeper into the woods. His heart was pounding like crazy, but he knew he had to keep running to get away from his pursuers. Unfortunately, his luck changed too quickly. A rough hand suddenly grabbed his shoulder and pinned him against the trunk of a nearby tree. The man, apparently the ringleader, smirked crookedly. "Did you think you could spy on us and just walk away?" Accusing Gleb of constantly ruining all their plans, the criminals soon tied his hands with a strong rope. The ringleader's words sounded threatening. "You've been throwing a wrench in our plans for too long. It's time to put an end to this once and for all." The poachers dragged him away from the paths where random witnesses might pass. With each step, each look, Gleb was filled with chilling horror. He realized that he had practically no time left and that he had to rely on a miracle. When they stopped in a secluded corner, the ringleader confidently said, "That's enough. No one will be able to find him here." Gleb was ready for the worst, but a sudden rustling in the thickets made everyone freeze. A large cat emerged from the dense shadows, looking at the poachers with obvious hostility. It was the same palace's cat mother. The past months had not erased from her memory the smell and image of the man who had once saved her baby. Letting out a powerful roar, the predator fearlessly rushed at her enemies, causing them to jump aside and release Gleb. When the men in the guise of predators were forced to retreat, the palace's cat approached Gleb. He was desperately trying to untie the knots, but to no avail. Then, the predator, looking at the man assessingly, carefully nudged his tied hands with her nose, as if showing that she wanted to help. Gleb froze, allowing her to gnaw through the thick rope that was constricting his wrists. A few moments later, the man felt that he was free again. He got to his feet, turned to his rescuer, and whispered a short, "Thank you." The cat looked at him attentively, her eyes showing both tension and confidence. A palpable connection was established between man and animal at that moment. They both understood the common risk and realized how much they could protect each other. With a farewell nod, the palace's cat disappeared into the deep shadows of the undergrowth, like a shadow of the night itself. And yet, she had once again given Gleb a chance to continue his work. In the following days, Gleb often caught himself looking towards the mysterious forest. A scene flashed through his mind, how a formidable but noble huntress came to his rescue. He had no doubt that she was still wandering somewhere among the branching trees, protecting her territory and her young. The bond that had formed that day clearly demonstrated how powerful the union of man and nature can be when man chooses to protect rather than destroy. Each time he delves into these memories, Gleb involuntarily smiles. After all, every good deed done in this world sooner or later returns to the one who did it. Friends, how did you like this amazing story? Share your impressions in the comments. If the events you just learned about touched your heart, give it a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new exciting stories. Until next time.